This is the AC30 hand-wired version. It's one that's come in for some mods and upgrades. I'm starting by removing these 16mm alpha pots because they're not good quality pots for an amp in this price range. And you cannot really tighten them to the chassis, and you can't use a lock nut, but that one's okay. But this one and these two were actually so loose from the factory that you don't even need a tool to loosen them. And that's just an issue with these pots, in that they, if you really tighten them, it'll strip the bushing, the threads on the bushing. And they're used for guitar pedals a lot, and they're fine for that, you know, in a 9-volt, 12-volt circuit, 18-volt even. You know, that's not a lot to go wrong. The pot taper is not as critical on a pedal as it is on an amp. And I also understand that for size and cost considerations, a 16mm can be a good choice for a pedal. So can a 9mm. And the trade-off is that occasionally you have to take the whole thing apart and tighten the nuts. And most people don't do it. That's how you get bad solder joints. But in an amp at this price range, I think they could have done a much better job from the get-go. And in just a moment, I'll get one of the new pots and compare it to one of these old ones, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Another thing that irks me about these, though it's not as bad as a lot of Marshalls, is the hole alignment. These are the openings that were machined, I assume on a computer, in the top panel. And these are the openings that were machined, I assume, by a computer in the chassis. And they are not on the same center lines. Many Marshalls, JCM 2000s and 900s especially, they don't really line up. And you don't really notice it when the knob's on, but sometimes you'll have a knob that just seems to be a little off center. This is something that's really simple to get right. I mean, I get that right in my own amps that I build and make. And I certainly have a lot less of a budget than Korg, which owns Marshall and Vox. You'd think that they would program their CNC a little more accurately, because it's really not that hard to do. Anyway, it almost doesn't matter. I'm about to open these all up to take the larger pots anyway. Okay. Here you can see the 16mm alpha pot versus the 24mm alpha pot with 3/8 inch bushing. It's a much higher quality metal used for the bushing, which means I can use a toothed washer to really secure this. CTS are fine, but this circuit uses quite a few 1 meg audio and 1 meg 500K pots. And the CTS audio taper pots in those values tend to have a dead zone where there's just, in the very bottom, there's just no change, no change, no change. There it is, and there's no gradual. Whereas these alphas, it's much more gradual, and it's really nice. And this is just one of those wonderful times when an inexpensive part performs really well. These are also used in a lot of high-end amps by people who could use anything, and they have found that these things sound good, they last well, they have a nice torque, they're easy to clean, and the tapers are fairly consistent. They're not exactly what you would consider the ideal audio taper, but most applications that's really splitting hairs, it works really well. Over here, we've got the stock knob and one of the new knobs. Now the stock knob is a push-on, and they come off with some regularity. The new one is a set screw. It'll be much more solid and should stay where you leave it. They're both called cream. When you have the actual cream here from this knob, the stock one looks a little grayed out, a little too much brown in it, and it doesn't pop against the panel as much. These are just a really lovely touch. All right, I've enlarged this one to 3/8, and I've got this paper towel beneath it, so any little crumbs like this that fall in the inside will fall on the paper towel, so I can clean up my bench easily, and none of those little giblets will fall down inside the chassis, because gravity is working in our favor. I've already done this first one. I'm using a stepped bit, max torque and speed on this Ryobi rechargeable, which is comparable to most of the DeWalt's, though it's a little more chartreuse than yellow, if that matters to you. I found this thing is great, and I've got 3 rechargeable batteries for it, so it never slows down my workload. On some amps and chassis and faceplates, I'll put blue painter's tape to protect the surface in case any little stray bits fly off. That's mostly an issue with aluminum chassis, which will have little spiraling bits. This is a steel chassis. It's not been an issue, so as long as I'm okay with sacrificing a bit of my left thumbnail, it should be fine. So it's just over 1/4 inch, the stock opening. It's a metric thing. I need to go 3 notches on this SAE stepped bit to get to 3/8. There we go, 3/8 of an inch. I'll do the rest off camera. All right, all of them have been opened up to 3/8. Now I can lift this up and unpry it from the stickum. It's right here. I don't know how that happened. Oh, I know, I'm catching the lip of the... And most of the little bits just fell down in my trash can. Some of them I missed, so I'll have to vacuum a little bit. But the next thing I need to do is go on the back. Let me feel it first. I may not need to. That one needs a little bit. That one needs a little bit. Yeah, I've got some deburring to do. So let me flip this around and I'll show you how I deburr the other side. All right, here you can see some slightly rough edges where the steel is actually just coming out, making a thin lip. Traditionally, you'd use a deburring tool like this. Just go around from the other side and work it around, and it'll do that. I can't really do it from this angle. And I keep that around because sometimes there are holes that I need to deburr that's the only option for. But what works best most of the time is I've got this nice case-hardened steel countersink bit on a flexible shaft for my same screwdriver, power screwdriver. Voila! We do all these, and then we're ready for the next bit. All the new pots are installed. You'll see the other side later when it's time to wire them. But I thought I'd share a nice little tip on putting knobs back in place, set screws especially. It can be really hard to get them to all line up precisely, and I've tried all kinds of methods. And what I've come to do recently is I will tighten them almost all the way, but then I can turn them past that and until I get it adjusted. So I'm gonna get this first one adjusted so that looks pretty even on both sides. All right, right about there, right about there, and that's where it stops. So that's my center, and I'll often stack guitar picks beneath it. Let me see if I got another one handy to get it. I want to get it elevated just a little bit higher than that because right now it's sitting, yeah, this will work great. Right now it's sitting on the nut, and that's friction between the plastic of the knob and the metal of the nut makes it hard to turn. A little bit of resistance is good, but not too much. So 2 guitar picks, still on center. On the next ones, I'll put it in place on this before I do it. And now it'll turn from 0 to 10 exactly as I want. If I want to fine tune it at that point, I can. That looks pretty good. I started removing all the parts that I'm going to change. I started with the electrolytic caps and these 1/2 watt screen grid resistors, which are ridiculous. And I noticed something really strange in this that I've not seen in previous hand-wireds. They used to always have 1/2 watts this size, carbon comps. Now they've got these tiny little things in here, which look like carbon comps. Are they 1/4 watts? Did they find a supplier with really tiny 1/2 watts? I don't know. There's no information on that. And where that can be important is that, say that they are 1/2 watts. Say that these are 1/2 watts and these are 1/2 watts. Most resistors, if they're the same wattage, but the body type is very different like this will have be rated for a higher voltage drop across it than this one will. And for all I know, these are 1/4 watts, which technically kind of work, but both for reliability, where you don't want one of those 1/4 watt resistors to fail because there's a surge in current, and also for noise because given two resistors of the same material and the same value, as you increase the wattage, the self-noise of the resistor goes down. So I've got some resistors to replace in this one that I normally don't replace because the values are fine. It's not that critical what it's made of. But in this case, when they go down to these tiny little, possibly quarter watts, I don't trust that. And, you know, this is not me second guessing Korg/Vox. This guy, the owner, sent it to me. This is going to represent my work, and I cannot have my work depend on whether one of these little 220K resistors were to fail. So I'm going to put in two resistors that I know will not fail. So I've got a lot more part and solder removal to go. Getting the solder, the lead-free solder out of these turrets is a pain in the butt. One of the best things about working with this lead-free stuff is it keeps stripping the tinning off of my iron. I have to keep retinning the iron constantly, otherwise there is just none left on there and it just won't heat things up well. It's a very painstaking process. I know why they use lead-free. They have to use lead-free. I get that, but it is really not good stuff, at least at the quality level of lead solder that most amplifier companies are using. I'm well aware that there are very high quality lead-free solder options out there. They tend to be more expensive for very good reasons. I have yet to see an amp company which is using them. So, yeah, I'm not some old man, shouting at clouds, "Bring me back my lead." But this stuff is horrible as far as service goes, and I've seen a lot of broken solder joints in amplifiers that use this inexpensive lead-free stuff, where previous years of the same amp, where they had leaded solder connections, those solder joints just tend to hold up a lot better. So it's a thing. What can you do? All right, I'll show you what's made the grade at the end of this, though I expect I'll probably be replacing this 47R depending on where everything sits with the wall voltage. Everything that's missing is getting changed. It's easier to focus on the things that made the cut, which is not a lot. New pot's ready to be wired up. This thing's going to sound so much better soon. Getting all those old components out and getting the old solder out, or at least most of it. I've got a few places I've got to get a bit more. That's the majority of the work on this amp, really. And that's the part that you're really glad you didn't have to watch me do the whole thing, though you may not know it. All right, this is that hand wired after a lot of work was done to it. So all new pots, some other little bits here and there. I'll get into a little bit. 95% of the components on the board are changed out. The stock bias resistor wasn't too bad as far as the bias, but it was mounted right up on the board and way too close to this capacitor next to it. It would have roasted it. I did go from 47 to 62 just to get a little bit cooler, so if the owner plays in a place where the wall voltage goes over 125, nothing will go wrong. And the amp's sounding really good now. That was with the low end fullest. Now let's go to the tight mode, same thing. Makes it really versatile. It's a nice sounding channel. I've done enough of these videos I don't have to show everything, but I'll show quite a few things. So going to the brilliant top boost channel. Ouch. If I start bleeding all over the place, it's for my art, man. It's for my art. All right, moving to the top boost brilliant channel. I've got a 3-way bright switch, so with it off, just a little bit. And some more. None of them are extreme. You know, you can dial it in pretty nicely. Depending on your other settings, is more or less noticeable. So let me make the amp overall a bit brighter. Brightest, medium, no bright cap. So I'm not trying to radically make changes, just so that the sound and the guitar can be tweaked exactly right. And then the boost switch, which in stock form is kind of nasty, on it now is very useful. Cannot play because my finger's falling off. Sorry about hitting the camera tripod there. All right, this thing's gonna get put back together and shipped back out to the owner on Monday, and I think he'll be very happy to get it. If you're interested in this, or you didn't hear a huge amount of difference, I've got better videos of these things, but I only have so much time to do this today, and that's about all the time I got.